April is going to bring some changes to the dairy cattle genetic arena. Katie Schmitt joins us from the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. This organization is responsible for genetic evaluations of dairy cattle and goats in the United States. Katie says the council is due for a genetic index adjustment and a genetic base change in April. She says dairy farmers are going to want to pay attention to this one. We start with the base change and how it could influence breeding decisions on your farm.
The base change is something that happens every 5 years in the United States, and it's done as a way to basically move the starting line of how we measure potential or progress in our dairy cattle. So what kind of breeding values can we create with our next mating decisions?
What are some of the traits that breeders are looking for? What exactly are we talking about today?
Yes, so the traits that CDCB is responsible for are really the big ones that dairy producers are familiar with. So the ability to select our next generation off of milk production, fat and protein, fertility traits, longevity and livability, as well as fertility and type and conformation, so what the cow looks like. So there is a list of about 49 traits that producers can select off of, and most of that information comes from CDCB. We do work in partnership with the Holstein Association for the type or conformation data for Holstein cattle, but what producers are used to seeing when they look at a bull proof or a bull book or their female genomic evaluations and information from their testing providers, that information is sourced from CDCB, which means that in April, with this base change happening, we're going to see those values drastically change, and it's a good thing. It means that we have seen genetic progress in our dairy cattle in the last 5 years, and we just need to update those numbers so that we can make just really good informed decisions and compare across history and over time. So for like a Holstein cow, right now we are estimating that our PTA, so our predicted transmitting ability for a Holstein in milk alone, we're going to see that number drop about 750 pounds in a bull proof or in a female evaluation because of genetic progress. So a decrease in April is actually a really good thing for our U.S. national herd.
Some of these traits, is it fair to say that if the base changes, it means the standard is changing because of genetic improvement?
We'll say the average is changing. So the way we are measuring or what we are basing something off of, but the standard for how we measure remains the same. We're just going to shift that start line, shift that base or that foundation up a little bit to meet where we're at today.
So do you want to pull out maybe some of the traits that are going to be improving drastically or that are noteworthy?
Sure. So on the traits that we're seeing genetic progress, so again, these are going to be values that will decrease in April in our evaluations, and that is because we have made progress. So we are adjusting to meet those cows or the average cow born in 2020. So for Holsteins, again, we're going to see about a 750-point decrease in milk PTA. So that's 750 pounds more that our cows in 2020 were producing than our cows in 2015. So that's where that number comes from. And we're going to see the same thing in the fat and protein with a decrease, which means a genetic progress, for fat and protein of about 30 to 45 pounds for protein and fat, respectively. And we see similarly in our Jersey cattle, increase in genetic progress. So again, a decrease in PTAs for about 400 pounds in milk and 20 and 15 pounds in fat and protein, respectively. So the way producers are paid, we're going to see progress happening there, which means a decrease in PTAs. And then if we think about like productive life, how long a cow is productive in our herd, we measure that in months. So what we know based off of data in the National Cooperator Database is that our Holsteins in 2020 were productive for 2.5 months more than our cows born in 2015. So again, you're going to see a 2.5-month decrease in PTA for productive life. There's a lot of numbers, right, to talk through, and people who are interested in knowing more can find these values, these estimates of values at uscdcb.com. We've published these, we've shared them so the industry can prepare for what's coming in April. And then we will share specific values after the April evaluation. We can't predict exact numbers, so we're predicting estimates for now, and then we'll publish reality when we have those numbers available.
The nitty-gritty details can be found on your website, but taking a step back, Katie, now when we talk about value and what traits mean on the farm and what this change means directly to a dairy producer, what does that look like on the farm?
Yeah, so the big thing that we have to remember, Stephanie, is that when we're making breeding decisions on the farm, if you're a farmer who's really engaged and involved in that, you're probably making those decisions yourself. But if you're working with an external partner for those decisions, a lot of times we have values in mind that are essentially thresholds that we require our bulls to meet or our females to meet to stay in the herd. So what producers need to be aware of with this base change is that those values might not be applicable anymore because of this base change. Because, again, we are shifting the starting line or the zero of our PTAs. So if you have a standard for milk or for fat or for protein when you're making decisions, people should just be aware or know how that is impacting their threshold so that they can make informed decisions in April and moving forward.
Also coming in April, the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding is updating its genetic index. I asked Katie if that means that some genetic traits are going to be added or removed from the list, or if some are going to have more value in the next 5 years.
CDCB publishes Net Merit. It's our national index. It was last updated in August of 2021 when we added new traits. So we added heifer conception rate, early first calving, and residual feed intake into that equation, if you will. In April of 25, we're not going to see new traits introduced into that formula or into that index, but instead we're going to see a shift happening of the economic weights that are placed on each of those traits. This formula is designed or created through economic value, either that producers are making through a paycheck, so through their milk check or through their cull check at the sales barn, or it's in money saved or in costs that they have associated with labor of different events happening in our cattle, in the cow's life. So we're going to see a shift in those values to better match where we're at today in terms of how producers are paid. So no new traits to pay attention to in that index, but just know that those weights are going to change and that will impact, again, those values starting in April.
What are some of the traits that have the most weight, the most economic value for producers today? And maybe
Sure.
How has that changed in the last decade?
Well, yes, you might be surprised, Stephanie. So this is an index that started in the 1960s, I believe, and it started out just as milk and fat, right? That was what we could select off of, and it's what farmers were paid for. And over time, we added protein, and then we added somatic cell, and we add fertility, and we add health, and we add conformation, all these other pieces. And today, what we're seeing in a change from the last time this was revised 4 years ago, I think the big story is actually on the component side of things. And we're seeing a decrease in protein this time and an increase in fat because of future forecasting for component pricing across the U.S. says that fat is going to be worth more moving forward than protein is today. So we're going to see a shift happening in that index to better match those markets. So fat actually carries the most weight in this index because it is the most valuable trait today for an economic weight and economic value. The other piece that people should be aware of that is also very integral in this index is the ability for an animal to live, so livability, as well as the efficiency of our cows, so the feed efficiency, if you will, and the cow's ability to convert feed sources into high-component milk for consumers.
Katie Schmitt along with us. She's the Industry Relations Manager with the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. She encourages you to find resources, find more details to be prepared for the base change and genetic index adjustment in April at uscdcb.com. Again, their website is uscdcb.com. For the Midwest Farm Report, I'm Stephanie Hoff.